You're listening to The Knowledge Spot, your number one resource for sharing information that promotes success, personal development, and happiness. I'm your host, Jared Cherry, and my goal is to shed a light on the strategies, mindsets, and routines that have led to each of my guests' individual success. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen, and I hope you enjoy what we have in store. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to The Knowledge Spot. Today, I have a guest that, honestly, I'm very honored to be given the chance to interview. Her name is Gerda Frieberg, and to start it off, Gerda, I think it's almost impossible to do an introduction to you without stating the fact that you're a Holocaust survivor. And I actually wanted to know right off the bat how it feels. Do you feel like that is something that you're always going to be labeled as, that you'll always have attached to your life? Do you think it's impossible to ever shed that label?
It's not impossible, because when we were liberated, our bodies were liberated. We are still there. Many survivors don't speak about it anymore. They would love to forget it. You cannot forget years of horror and erase it from your mind. People, if they're trying to do it, they're really kidding themselves. Me, I never left the camp. I live with it. I speak in schools. I speak to students, to adults. I am still there. I'll always be there. And what I said before, I'll be free when I be buried.
Interesting. So I want to ask you then, what is it that makes you think differently than these other survivors? Because I studied a lot of Jewish history for my first undergraduate degree, and we always come across the idea that Holocaust survivors, they don't want, like you said, they wish they could forget it. But why is it that you have accepted the fact that this is something you can't forget, and you're actually, you told me before this interview started being recorded that you're willing to share, you don't have any secrets. So I want to know why it's that you feel that way compared to other survivors.
Well, first of all, as my second book is called, I am not a bystander.
Right.
That's number one. When I was in camp, and I'm going to do it very quickly because I don't want to keep you for a day here. When we were in camp, I was 3 years in a concentration camp in Sudetenland, which is Czechoslovakia, that was annexed. That part of Europe was annexed by the Nazis in 1938. I came to camp in 1942. I was liberated on May 8 or 9, because the war was already over when we were liberated. So 3 years in concentration camp, 2 years in a ghetto. We were free to do what?
Yeah.
No parents, no education, no trade, no money, no country that wanted us. But in camp, I had a friend who was actually born in Germany, but was deported to Poland in 1938. When the new transports arrived, that were our news. We did not know what's going outside the camp. There was no news coming except when new transport of girls arrived in the camp. Because When I came, there were 90 girls. There were 1,000.
Gotcha.
One day, that one group came from the town where my friend was, and she found out that her parents were taken with the whole community, and that there was such a place at Auschwitz. We never knew this. And so she realized that she's all alone in this world. And I remember sitting with her outside in the evening, and she suddenly turned to me and says, "Gerda, when you survive, you must promise me that the world that doesn't know what is happening to us, what's done to us, must know when you are liberated, you must speak about it." The war was over. I kept my promise. This is also the name of my first book.
Right.
And telling the story so now people can read what happened. Now, when I came to Canada, I began to speak. The first time when I was elected president of a small neighborhood women's chapter, and at my installation in 1964, was the first time that I had a chance to speak to an audience. And in my acceptance speech, I spoke about the Holocaust. And I never stopped since then. That was 1964.
Interesting. So that being said, Gerda, when you hear about other Holocaust survivors who they refuse to talk about it or they just don't want to talk about it, do you think that they're making a mistake, or do you totally understand where they're coming from and you're willing to accept that way to handle it?
Well, you have to understand what happened when the survivors came to Canada. We were immigrants.
Yes.
And we were not accepted. And so the survivors created their own community.
Right.
And they were lived among themselves. When I started to speak, I was asked, why are you still talking about it? You live in Canada. You have a wonderful opportunity here to rebuild your life.
Yes.
And my answer would be, so we killed first the people and now their memory?
Interesting.
And I continued. Now, because many survivors lived in their close community of survivors, they spoke Yiddish, Polish, and they really never had a chance to learn English. They get up to speak.
Right.
Now remember that older people didn't survive. We were children when the war started.
Right.
So my education was interrupted when I was 13 years old. So
right.
Now take those survivors' children, taken to camp, to concentration camp, because in those days, 15, 16, you were a child. It was a different world.
Yes.
And now 3 years later, I'm supposed to be an adult. Now,
wow.
the language was not easy for them to learn.
Of course,
because
yeah.
It's easier to speak Yiddish to their friends. And they had no contact. So the language problem probably was the first thing. Now, I cannot go into their brains and tell you why they did it. Maybe many wanted to forget, but you cannot forget. They came out when Spielberg made the movie The Schindler's List.
Yes, fantastic film.
Created the Shoah Foundation and sent some people. I trained the interviewers, and they interviewed the survivors. And that is the first time in their own environment, in their own apartment, and they invited sometimes the children, they would tell the story. Once they told the story, they now came forward and volunteered to become speakers. That's when I started to speak in 1964. There were 4 or 5 speakers in all of Toronto.
Wow.
And the number just mushroomed after the interviews with the Spielberg Foundation people.
So I'm wondering then, Gerda, did you find that when the numbers started mushrooming and you started to hear a lot more from survivors who've gone through similar things to you, did you find that there were some shared qualities that all you had? Obviously, the history is slightly shared, but I mean, in terms of life philosophy after such an event, did you find that these survivors all shared a certain quality?
It all depends. You see, I can only speak on my behalf.
Of course.
I never left. I remember, for instance, I woke up yesterday and look in the calendar, and it's the 20th of July.
Yeah.
And the first thought is 71 years ago, Stauffenberg put a bomb on the table to kill Hitler. That was I forgot the name in English. Would say he wanted to ask an assassination.
Right, the failed attempt, right?
A failed assassination.
Right.
The bomb exploded, but didn't kill him. Somebody else got him, and then Stauffenberg was hanged with his conspirators. But show me one survivor that would look at a calendar and say, 20th of July, what happened on that day? And this is my life. On the 20th of January, ask survivors what happened.
And they'll all say the
The
same
Wannsee
thing.
Conference in 1942.
Right.
In July of 1938, what happened? They deported the Polish Jews from Germany. This is my life.
Yes.
And the survivors try to live a new life. Most of them, not all of them. So maybe I'm unique. Every day I look in a calendar and I remember exactly what happened the day so many years ago. I just wrote my second book. I didn't need to look up Google for dates or places.
Wow. Yeah, and I don't think anyone, of course no one could blame you for, I think some people, they would say, like you were saying, other survivors would say, well, that's living in the past. But I think in your case, you're present. What you have to do right now in time is share the information of the past, and that's why, again, I'm really honored to be able to do this interview with you, because I feel like I'm getting access to knowledge that most people at this, like, again, I studied Jewish history at my undergraduate for the first time I did one, and all the information we were ever able to receive was completely secondhand, because it's very hard to come by people who are willing to share the events of such a tragic thing like you've been through.
Well, you see,
Sorry, Gerda, you cut out. Are you still there?
Who will tell the story?
Oh, there we go. I think, can you hear me now, Gerda?
Yeah, but something came up, internet connection.
Yeah, can you hear me now? I think it's okay now.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, so go on. You're going to tell a story?
Well, I said that when I began to speak, I said, when the last survivor dies, who's going to tell the story? We owe it to the people that perished. We owe it to the victims. When they were led to their gas chamber, turned around to the people behind them and said, remember us. That became my 11th commandment.
Interesting.
And I live every day. I wake up in the morning and I remember what happened. I can't shake it. I'm still there. I'll always be there. And you see, in a total different, my sister Oliver Shalom passed away 9 months ago.
Right.
She never talked about the Holocaust. She belonged to a hikers group and they didn't even know she's Jewish.
Wow.
And for sure not that she was a survivor. Hiking with these people for over 20 years.
Wow.
Never spoke about it. And she was on the Exodus. She had a lot of stories to tell.
Right. And I guess...
And that was her.
Yeah.
And I never stopped to talk because I feel it an obligation.
Right. And I want to let you know that I obviously it's very, very nice of you to feel obligated to tell this story for the sake of the survivors, but I think it's worth telling you that these stories, specifically of strong Jewish people, in my generation growing up, it felt like it was very difficult to come across mainstream examples of strong Jewish people without really digging deep. And I always love to hear these stories of, in your case, a strong Jewish woman, because it goes beyond you fulfilling an obligation to the people of the past. I think you're really setting a great example for, it goes beyond Jewish people too. You're setting an example for young people, and you're giving them a perspective on life that they need. I know I needed it personally.
Well, I speak, just the other day I spoke in Stephen Lewis High School.
Right, yeah.
In Thornhill.
Yep.
And it was quite amazing because a lot of Muslim kids were there. The girls with the scarves and all, I can tell the kids. They were so, I would say, mesmerized, sitting with so much attention. I kind of expected some of them of walking out.
Yeah.
Because of that whole propaganda and what's going on today in the world.
Right.
They came and lined up to shake my hand. May I hug you?
Well, that's beautiful, yeah.
And it was so moving for me that I could reach those young people and tell them, and that's what I tell them. We all pray to one God. They have different names.
Right. And for listeners Gerda and I are both from Canada, and we live in a part of Canada just outside of Toronto where it's extremely multicultural. I think for a lot of listeners who may not be coming from a situation like that, you've really got to understand that as one of Canada's greatest strengths, what people like Gerda and I have probably both realized over time, and I can only speak for myself, of course, is that just like Gerda said, when you're around this many people coming from different parts of the world with different stories of their own, you really see that it's not irrelevant, but it's such a minor detail in the greater picture of life, and you can relate to people as people, far beyond just where they're from. And I think Canada does that. It's an amazing part of Canada.
Well, that's right. You see, I don't speak to the young people in schools or whatever because I want them to feel sorry for me for what I went through. My mission is to, now you heard my story, a cultured nation like Germany, because I'm of German background, right? So right. I know that story, that I know, all the poetry, and I still read German books. I said, you are the future. And if you think of Germany, a cultured nation allowed itself to be led by vicious leaders and follow them. And look what the legacy that they left behind. My son will go somewhere, anywhere in the world and say, I am a child of survivors. And people say, oh, he never had a family, he never had great parents, and feel sorry for him. A German young person will go in the world and open their mouth, and I know it happens to me all the time. Are you German? Oh, I wonder what his father did and how many people his grandfather killed. And this is the legacy the nation left for the future. And you, the young people of today, must make sure that it never happens in Canada or anywhere. You don't want to have your children be burdened by this kind of a legacy.
Right.
That's my message to the students, not my pain that I lost my family and that I stood there and with no education. And I came to Canada, I didn't speak a word of English.
Right.
And 10 years later, I had my own airplane and flew with the big guys. I was instrument rated, the only woman on top.
That's actually a great segue, because I want to talk about, Gerda, all the other things you've done since the Holocaust. So I did hear you got your piloting license. Can you explain where that came from? Where did the longing to fly come from?
We lived in a small town, and my aunt lived in Berlin. It was my mother's sister. That's why I spent so much time in Berlin, because I spent my summers there. Right. And that's how I saw the Nazi Party come to power and what all happened. I have the total history. And so you can take your mom's, I think your mom is my book. But so this is why I have the total history. Right. And so now my aunt comes to visit, and she flies into our neighboring town. And my father had a Harley Davidson with a sidecar, and so I wanted to see the airplane when my aunt will arrive. And I'm standing there, and you can imagine in those days, I'm talking 1935, 36. I'm like 10 years old, and all this plane is in the air, and I'm wondering what it's keeping there. Why it doesn't fall out of the air? And as it lands, that was for me like a miracle. Something happened. Like, it's not a bird. Why
wow.
is it? What is it keeping there up there? And I said, I'd really like to fly like this. And then we had somebody that had a glider in our town. Right. And there was an escarpment. And my father knew, and I'm not home, he knew where I was. We were pulling ropes. Oh, when he was on the edge of the escarpment in the glider, and we kids were running and pulling the rope so he got airborne.
Right.
When I came to Canada, I lived on Bayview and York Mills, and I always saw the little planes coming from Battenville over my house.
Oh yeah.
And one day I got in a car and drove over to Battenville. And I signed up for flying lessons. When I went out with the pilot, I looked at that single-engine Cessna. It looked to me like a mosquito. I said, this is going to keep two people up there in the air. Well, I did my pilot's license, flew all the way to Nassau, to the Bahamas.
Wow.
In an air race.
In a race?
Yeah.
Did you win?
It was 65 women pilots leaving the airport, the island airport.
Yeah.
All the way to Nassau. We made some stopovers. We had to refuel because they don't have enough gas to go all the way. It was 17-hour flight. So out of the 65, I only had 40 hours flown. There were instructors, women that had their own flight schools. They already were seasoned pilots.
Right, yeah.
A beginner. I don't know what I was doing there. But I came in 45th, which was good.
Wow, nice.
Which, being among all those pilots that knew exactly where to go when the wind goes, whether they should go high altitude or low altitude, and knew exactly what to read the weather. I was kind of stupid. I didn't even couldn't even pronounce trigonometry. I still can't.
Right. So that I'm wondering then, do you think that because of what you've been through at a younger age at that point, especially as a kid, do you feel like you gained a sense of confidence that allowed you to say, you know what, I want to take flying lessons. I've only have 40 hours, but I'm going to compete in a race. Do you think that coming from the Holocaust as a survivor gave you, instilled you with a new sense of confidence?
No, because I was like this as a child, and if you read my book, you'll see how I maneuvered myself. First of all, at the age of 11, the only Jewish child in school, and the principal walked in the classroom and said, the teacher didn't show up. We didn't have supply teachers in those days.
Right.
He walked in, and you know what kids do at that age when the teacher isn't in. And he walks in and says, it's as noisy in a Jewish prayer house. Now, I didn't know what he really means, because in Germany, we like the holy blossom. You can hear a pin drop on the floor. Right. I didn't know that he meant the steeple in Poland. I've never been in Poland. So he said something derogatory about Jews. I took my books and I walked out. He says, where are you going? I said, well, you said it's as noisy as in a Jewish prayer house, so maybe I should leave. I came home. My father was so proud of me. We were the only Jewish family in town. And where did it come from? The pride in being Jewish. And the chutzpah and the guts to stand up to a principal. They didn't wear jeans in those days. Principal was like, let me touch.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm getting up and I'm walking out of the classroom. Then I'm signing up. I wanted to study medicine, so I wanted my report card, and he went even with me because he didn't give me a report card. I maneuvered to get a report card, and I went and signed up for exams. I passed the exam, and I had to sign up for high school. So I walked into the principals in the high school room, and he says, yes, you know what? This is great. The test was flawless, but we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, you have to be 12 when you enter high school. I said, I'll be 12 in 6 weeks. What does it matter? 6 weeks makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Guess what?
It did. Yeah. Just because he wanted it to. So then, Gerda, if it's not...
But that's me. You see, that comes... Not because of the Holocaust.
Right.
That's who I am.
Right. So if you had always been such a strong, brave woman, what do you think, or if anything, can you tell me, is there something that the Holocaust did change in your personality that, let's go beyond the negative here, even for the positive, that helped you in future parts of your life?
Well, I made a decision that the Nazis are nobodies in a uniform. My grandfather was buried with military honors because he was in a special something for the emperor, for the Kaiser.
Right.
My father fought in World War I, okay? I'm not going to lower my head to these nobodies. And that's how I went to the Holocaust. I shouldn't be here. The shtick that I pulled while I was in camp, the people that I saved while I was in camp and stood up for everybody, this is my nature.
Right.
That's who I am. Today, Jared, I speak to the homeless. I don't look down on them. They didn't choose to be there. But I want to bring them out of where they are and give them courage and show them the way. I don't have to do this. But I know how to do this, so I do it.
Yeah.
So that is in me. It has the Holocaust has not changed who I am.
Interesting.
I actually shouldn't be here, the shtick that I pulled in camp.
Right. And for listeners rather, who are wondering what kind of shtick she's talking about, I'm just going to rattle off one story I've read about you where you were living in Poland at the time. This is right when the war is starting, and they take your father away, and they send, and correct me if I'm wrong at any part, but they send you to a work camp, and what you managed to do is not only escape the work camp, but you acquired the documents that you would need in order to free your father from the concentration camp that they placed him in. And you snuck on board a train as a German, not a Jew, made your way to the camp, spoke with the Germans like you were a German and not a Jew, and did everything you could to, unfortunately it didn't work, but I mean, the stuff this woman has done is amazing.
Actually, I want to just correct you on something. When that happened, like when my father was taken away, he jumped off the train and ran. They, escaped being shot in the forest.
Right.
Because that's what they did with the people. He then lived in Iran, and he didn't know where he's going, and he landed in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
At the other end of Poland. That's where they took him, and he found himself in the Soviet Union. But he was so lonely and so missed us that when the war broke out between Germany and Russia in 1941, he dressed as a peasant and came where we were in the ghetto. We were taken first from my home into a ghetto. Overnight, we were homeless and poor. Wow. My mother, my sister, and I. Now, we're living in the ghetto in one room, and one day, and we know my father is in the Soviet Union, but the war was on now with the Soviet Union. And one day they knock on the door and I open and this guy is standing there till I looked at his face and realized it was my father. So now I went, it was the ghetto. Now I got on a train with the German soldiers pretending to be German, took off the Jude star.
Right.
And I was flirting with them. And that's how I knew that was Poland right now because we were deported to Poland.
Right.
And I knew that they will not come and look for ID in a military car, where the soldiers are. So, and I didn't have an ID. So that was my escape. The kids, the guys didn't think of anything that I don't belong there. He thought I am a German girl and they were flirting with me. When we arrived at the next station, I got out. I was already now on the other side of the border, and I went to get papers for my father so I can bring it to the ghetto and register him, and we'd get food rations for him. Because food rations were given per person, and I don't have to tell you that wasn't enough to survive.
Of course, right.
But if one more person came and you had to share this, so I wanted to make sure first, and I also went to our mate to pick up his clothes. Right. Because we left it with our mate at our home. We were the only Jews in town. I didn't know anybody, but that's in me. I had the chutzpah as a child, and I had the chutzpah in camp, and that's how I survived. And I never stopped fighting for the right of. That's in my next book. I'll just go to the printer and you'll read. I stand up for anybody that needs help. That's the book is called Never a Bystander.
Right. So then I'm wondering, Gerda, because a lot of the listeners here, they're probably looking for advice on maybe they weren't like you, and as a child they weren't always as brave and able to rush forward at the things they want to accomplish and the things they want to do. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's trying to find the motivation to be brave and courageous?
Well, first of all, for me, because my father expected so much from me. He just knew that I am different. And I didn't want to disappoint him, even if I lost him and he was not around anymore. I always think I have to do something that he would be proud of me. He was proud of me while I was in school, when I brought my report cards, when I maneuvered myself into high school at the age of 11. And that's how I continue my life, even if he isn't here anymore. And I followed my star. I came to Toronto with $80, and I didn't speak a word of English. 10 years later, I had my own airplane and was a instrument-rated pilot in Toronto, the first woman.
Wow.
But because I reach for the sky, I can do it.
And what I'm getting from that even more is beyond the fact that you had this kind of personality that motivated you to propel for the stars, like you said, you were also doing it for reasons beyond selfishness. You were doing it, in your case, for your father. So I'm wondering, would you tell these people who are looking for motivation to be brave to start looking beyond themselves and start looking how this bravery can help others?
That's right. That's what I also always feel that my father expected it of me. And I cannot, even if he's not here, I would not want to disappoint him. And this is who I am. I cherish, what I have accomplished, nobody helped me. And this is the message I give, for instance, to the homeless. I said, you can do it. And you'll be very proud one day that you've done it. And don't count on anybody. You follow your star.
Right.
You see, when I joined B'nai B'rith Women, a small chapter, 2 women resigned. They didn't want to be in the same group as I am, as a survivor.
Why?
Because survivors didn't count.
They didn't count?
Nobody wanted. We couldn't even rent, like people were renting 2 rooms in a house upstairs.
Yeah.
And a survivor they said, no, we don't have. We didn't count.
Wow.
They looked down upon us.
Yeah, I learned a little bit of that in one of my classes, and from what I remember, and obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading that a lot of Canadian Jews, they were very ignorant of what the conditions were in Germany and Poland and other places with camps. Mm-hmm. And they looked at these survivors, from what I understand, as they almost felt like the survivors were shameful. Like they didn't do everything they could to fight back, like they were weak. Is that the true? Is that the kind of impression you got?
The same was in Israel.
Wow.
I lived in Israel for 3 years, and at that time, till the Eichmann trial, the Israelis looked down on the survivors. You went like sheep. Wow. Yeah? What about the Warsaw Uprising? What about the uprising in the death camp of Sobibor? What about all those Jewish partisans?
Right. Yeah. It's obviously. I mean, I think it boils down to they were ignorant. It wasn't like 2015 where you had the internet and you can see these atrocities up close and personal. This was a generation that, unfortunately, they really had no idea what was going on down there, I imagine.
It wasn't until Schindler's List and the Eichmann trial that people took notice. When a teacher invited me to speak in a Jewish school and sent a note to the parents of the survivor be speaking, the masters wouldn't let the kids go to school because it was too difficult to listen. I said it wasn't too difficult for the children to die, but it's too difficult for you children to listen.
Yeah.
I never shut up.
Yeah.
I didn't let me. Why are you still speaking about it? You can't bring them back. That means I killed their memory.
Right. Yeah, it's really it's quite amazing. So I'm trying to picture you for a second here. I'm going to talk about when you're in Canada. You're, like you said, you have $80. You have no education beyond the little bit of what I guess was called elementary school in Germany, and you don't speak much English. And beyond that, you've lost, I think I counted, you had lost over 100 members of your family in the Holocaust.
72, yeah.
Right. So you have, again, painting the picture, you don't really have much family. You have your sister and your mother with you.
Yeah.
You have no English. Right. And I imagine you came to Canada, at least did you think maybe other Jewish people were going to help me out? Is that what you originally thought?
No, I didn't look for help because I already lived in Israel.
Oh, so you knew better already. I
lived 3 years in Israel, and I worked. I'm self-taught designer and dressmaker, but then I did many other things. I was 32 years in the construction industry. My husband and I had the construction industry, and we had projects all over Ontario, and that's why I bought a plane, because it took me too long to go to the job sites whether it's Kingston or Thunder Bay or Ottawa. So I crossed the lake to St. Catharines was faster than going by car.
Right, that makes sense. And from what I understand, Gerda, that construction business that you built with your husband was extremely successful financially. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it was actually he was in the financial end.
Right.
He was great with the financial end, but I was on the construction. I redesigned the suites, the layout of these houses as a woman, because men really don't know.
Right.
And I was the first one with boots and a hard hat on a job site. There was not one woman. I did all our advertising, and I have all the newspaper clippings. I did all our brochures for our sales offices. I coordinated. I was an interior decorator. I did all our model suites. And I made their own drapes and their own bedspreads. I didn't buy it. I made it. I did my own flower arrangement. I was come to Ottawa and start unloading, and they called me from the tower. What else is coming out of that little plane? I brought all my yeah. So I am kind of just, anybody can do it. I can do it too. There is no such thing in my vocabulary that I don't know or I can't do.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to think about yourself, and I think a lot of my listeners are entrepreneurs, and I think listening to your story where you came again with not much in your pocket and not much in terms of skills.
Nothing. I didn't know a word of English.
Exactly. So I think any entrepreneur right now listening and you're waiting to press the trigger and you know you should, take from Gerda's example and just do something and don't put these limitations and pigeonholing on yourself, because again, if like she just said, if you can do it or she can do it, you can probably do it too. But I'm wondering, Gerda, having this attitude of I can do whatever I want to do, how often did you come across failure?
Oh, at the beginning, 2 steps forward, 1 backwards.
Exactly.
And then push forward.
It's funny because as I asked that question, I knew you were going to say that. It seems to me like the recipe for success is a lot of failure. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. We built houses and the interest rate raises till 19% and nobody can afford a mortgage. And I'm sitting with hundreds of homes in Ottawa, in Oshawa, in Hamilton, and I cannot sell a house. And the bank wants the money that I owe them.
So what kept you through it those times when you're going, oh my God, I'm failing? Did you know this is just a part of life? This is what I have to deal with?
Well, again, my chutzpah, I saved the company. My big mouth. Look, if I could personally ask the Chancellor of Germany for money for the Holocaust Center, and the President of Germany brings the check to Toronto. You need to know more?
Wow. Yeah, and for people who are wondering what she's talking about, I heard this story through my grandmother. So from what I understand, you were in Germany and you had a chance to, I can't remember why, but you were on stage.
The German Chancellor, Helmut Kohl, was invited to Toronto because he got an honorary doctorate from Toronto University. And because I don't believe that the next generation is the heirs of the sins of their fathers, I am always in touch with the German consul, with the German ambassador, because, my whole family, we were German of Jewish faith.
Right.
Okay? So I have no problem with the next generation. I didn't kill Jesus. But they called me Jesus killer, Christ killer. Okay? I didn't even know him. But so I have no problem with today's German, unless they're Nazis, right?
Right, of course.
So I got an invitation to a reception, and at that time I just finished creating the Holocaust Center, and I had a brochure, "We have gun will travel, never left without it." And as I was and I have photos of it, and not just I'm telling a story. And so as I'm introduced to the Chancellor, I said, I have a problem with your government. I asked the Foreign Ministry for a grant for our Holocaust Center, and they didn't even bother to answer. So he says, we don't give money to build Holocaust centers because we would open a floodgate. I say, understand this, but my Holocaust Center is already up and running for more than a year. But inside, we have a chimney, like a column. It's the hall of memories, where we placed ceramic tiles with names of victims of the Holocaust. Now, survivors that live in Toronto or in Canada, they had no education and they have jobs that they hardly make a living. They cannot pay me $1,000 for creating each tile for their parents. I want Germany to give them back the names because they died with numbers.
Right.
Well, he's like Stant. Called over the foreign minister, he says, I want you to take care of Mrs. Frieberg.
Wow.
I said, all I want from you, replace the numbers with their names. A few months later, I get an invitation. Wow. Open up. President Weizsäcker and wife request the honor of your presence at the ballet performance in the Pantages.
Wow.
Wow. Look who I was just a few years ago.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I don't even want to see the name because it's right, what I was called. And I look at the date and I said, oy vey, it's Erev Rosh Hashanah.
What are the odds?
I am chair of Canadian Jewish Congress, Ontario region, and I was the German president on the television with the...
So what did you do? Did you end up going?
So I called the ambassador and I said, this is what happened, but I am free in the afternoon. So he says to me, but he's meeting the Prime Minister Mulroney in the afternoon. I said, and I am not as important. So after a good laugh that he had, he says, maybe you can do something. And I said, and by the way, if he has anything to present to me, I want it presented inside the Hall of Memories because I want you to know where it goes, that I'm not just telling a story. Well, I have the photos. They'll be in my next book with the ambassador, the consul, the foreign minister, and another one of them presenting me the check.
Wow.
You won't find anybody to have this chutzpah to approach a chancellor of Germany for money and get it.
It's incredible, though, Gerda. Would you say that so for people who don't know what chutzpah is, I just learned this recently. It's the Yiddish word for the guts, basically, yeah. Right? The guts to do what she did, which was talk to the German counselor and ask him for money. For the people who don't have that chutzpah in them, or they don't feel like they have it at least, would you tell them everyone does, or do you think it's a very personal thing?
Yeah. You have to believe in your cause.
Right.
If you believe in your cause, you'll do anything. But first you have to believe in your cause. Never say it's not doable. It can't be done. There's no such thing. You have to try. You have to. The first try might not be. You see, I wrote a letter to the foreign ministry, but I didn't let go.
Failed, right? Yeah.
The chancellor. And look, you read in my book. I walk into the SS commander who, for a fun, would walk out and shoot anybody in sight in the camp. Yeah. And I walk into his office and ask him to send me to my sister's camp. You'll never hear a story like this. And he did. And then I write a letter to my mother and have it smuggled out of the camp by a Czech woman because I wanted my mother to know that we are together.
Right.
And then she pulls the same shtick. And that's how he survived.
Wow.
But you'll never hear this story. It's just, probably it's my grandfather's kind of, military something.
Right, something passed down through there.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring, though, that you think that, whether you got it passed down from your grandfather or you were just born that way, it's really inspiring to know that you think everyone has that in them. Because I think a lot of people, they don't understand that about themselves. They don't understand what limits they could really push if they just believed in themselves. And it sounds so corny and cliche, but I always say that things become cliche for a good reason.
Well, they're very easy to say that you can't do it. There's no such thing you can't do it. If somebody else can do it, I have to try to do it. Maybe not as good as somebody else, right?
Right.
maybe I can paint an apartment, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as a painter would do. But at least I can try.
You can try, exactly. And that actually brings up another question I have for you, Gerda. You're obviously this amazing, strong woman your whole life, but who besides your father, besides your family, outside of your family, was there anyone that you looked up to and you said, I want to be like them, I want to do this like them? Was there any single person that stands out?
I wouldn't know anybody because I was a child when the whole mess happened.
How about when the Holocaust is over and now you're more integrated into popular culture in different countries?
Now I had to take care of both my mother and my sister.
I see.
And I never stopped. And as a matter of fact, interesting that you ask this, because I had today an appointment with a cardiology, and I thought this is maybe I should put my stuff in order. And he says to me, and I said, my sister passed away and I can't deal with it. He says, you lost your compass.
Yeah.
That's all that is wrong with you. You always took care of your mother from childhood, of your sister, and now both are gone and you have no one to take care of. And now you lost where you were going all your life. And he's right.
I would say he's right, but I feel like it's my duty to let you know once again that you may have lost what you believe to be your personal compass at the time, but I think I really feel like you're fulfilling a very important gap here where you're connecting to kids in a very multicultural society and giving them a message that they need to hear. We don't hear this message enough. I never got the chance to speak with someone like you. I'm 24 years old now. I never got the chance in the 24 years of my life. So I think for what it's worth, Gerda, in my personal opinion, I think that should become, if it isn't already, part of your compass.
Well, I don't speak to children because I want them to feel sorry for me what I went through.
Right.
I will tell my story for a reason. This is what happened. And this is what can happen anytime, anywhere. And you have the power to stop this and make it a better world. This is my reason for speaking to students. And I've been doing this and I hope they listen. And how do you have to cherish the freedoms, the opportunities of this country? I traveled the world, Jared. I was everywhere, and people don't go places I go. Anybody know? That was in Tibet?
No, I didn't know you went to Tibet.
There isn't a country I haven't been except Japan, because I cannot. Because that's by choice. I cannot forgive them what they did to the prisoners of war.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to be there. That's by choice. But every other country, was it Asia, was it Africa, was it South America, I was in Antarctica and I was in the Arctic, and there is no place, whether it's Russia or you name it, and I was there. I waited 3 years for a visa to go to Tibet. The Chinese don't want anybody there. They don't want anybody to know what they're doing to the Tibetan people.
And did you go there to make the plight of the Tibetan people clear, or did you go there for other reasons?
No, I went there as a tourist.
Okay.
I wanted to know the country, the people, and I'm so impressed. I was a whole month in India, a whole month in China, but not only in Beijing and Shanghai. I know all of China. I know places people never heard of.
Right.
It's India, but because I have no education. So I always have to learn, and I don't say, okay, now I'm too old to learn.
Right. It's funny how you say you have no education, because in my opinion, your education is much greater than someone who went through the public school system for what we'd call traditional education. You learn from the school of hard knocks, as they would say, and I think that's infinitely more valuable, and it's a strong form of education in itself.
Yeah, that's what when I was on a convention for women, and my roommate was a leader already for years, had big positions, and I said to her, I envy you because you have all those diplomas from university and whatever she is. And she said, I would all trade it with you for what you learned by living.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
That was a compliment that I always will remember. She says, Gerda, you learn more by living than I ever could learn in any university, any diploma, anything that I have. But it's interesting that after all those years speaking in all kind of schools, and many Jewish schools, many non-Jewish schools, I spoke in Mississauga to a Catholic girls' school.
Right.
And the school was created by Polish nuns. And I come from a community that became Poland in 1922. It was Germany. We lived as Germans in Poland, right?
Right.
But we were the only Jews in the town, and I knew the nuns and, those monks and all that, the Catholic school. So it was very interesting for me to speak in a school that was created by Polish nuns. And as I finished, they come and give me a honorary diploma from high school graduation.
Wow, that's incredible. And you obviously deserve it.
I was in tears because I always say, look, the first thing they took away from me was to go finish my studies. And I tell how crushed I was as a 13-year-old when I couldn't go back to school.
And I think
I again had a chance to go to school.
Right. And I want to point out that I think this is really important for people of my generation to hear. I come from a generation where kids take school for granted, and I made that mistake myself.
Oh my goodness, you have an entitlement.
Exactly.
Of university education. You come out, what do you do? My granddaughter, 4 years of unskilled. Ollie, what am I to do now? I don't know. What did you do the 4 years there? Thousands of dollars, whatever.
Yeah, we need to make it clear to people going in school now that don't take it for granted. What you have is an access to information and knowledge that it's so powerful. There's a reason people say knowledge is power. And again, I just want to make that clear because I know I made that mistake going through high school. I was a terrible student, and I'm lucky enough that I learned from my mistakes eventually. And right.
So what? You would not even, I don't like to brag, but you wouldn't even believe what I do and never learned it. I copy every designer. And I have things to prove it because I copied all these gowns that they made and that I, for my customer and for myself, never learned to sew.
Right. So I have a funny story that I heard through my grandmother about you too. So I imagine this is when you've moved to Canada. She told me you were walking on Spadina Street, and for listeners who don't know what Spadina is, at that time, I'm assuming this is around the 50s and 60s, Gerda, is that correct?
Yeah, 1953.
1953, Spadina was known as the garment district of Toronto. So you'd go there and there'd be a lot of garment factories. And what I heard about you, Gerda, is you saw a sign that said operators wanted, and you had no idea what an operator was. No. You went and applied for the job. You've never made a dress in your life, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like you managed to make 18 dresses in one day.
Right. We got 70 cents for a dress.
I know a lot of it has to do with your own personal chutzpah, but I think a lot of people could learn that when you're at a point in your life where you only have $80 in your bank account, you don't have much to go on, you would be amazed of the things you're capable of doing.
Yeah, I walked. I didn't take this week. I was 7.5 cents for the ticket. Tickets for 15 cents.
Right.
I walked. But I followed my star. I was going to, whatever came across. I never said it. I cannot do it. It doesn't exist in my vocabulary.
So, Gerda, what about people who they don't know where their star is? How would you tell people to find their own star?
You have to love what you're doing. And I say to my grandchildren, you spend most of your life working. You don't spend it having fun. So when you work, you need to love what you're doing, and you have to have pride in what you're doing. If I made a dress, I would hang it up and not put it in a cupboard, hang it away, but I would have it hanging on the door of the cupboard. So I looked at it and I kind of admired my own work. And this is, you have to get this feeling that I can do this. So what I did this beautiful gown. and I got to take the next step. And and I loved to create.
Right.
And I walked in an empty apartment or empty house, and I put together a model suite. And then I came back and looked at the drapes that I made and the flower arrangements that I made and it's a beautiful furnished apartment that people were copying me. But I took pride in what I did, so I enjoyed doing it. It was a job, but I took pride in it.
Yeah, and that's sorry to interrupt, Gerda. I just want to say that feeling of taking pride in loving what you're doing but still calling it a job, that is a very rare phenomenon these days. I can't tell you how many people I know that they're working and they don't like it. They really don't like it.
My grandson finished all his exams for accountant, and he worked for a company, and he was so unhappy. I could see it in his eyes and in his face. He was so unhappy. Then got another job. Now it's my grandson again. And I said to Matthew, you're not happy where you are. Change. That's the worst thing you can do. You will hate he's an accountant, right? I said, you'll hate the decision you made. But it's not so. You find a place where you enjoy what you're doing because you'll be going to do it all your life.
Right. So then I'm wondering, Gerda, for people who find themselves in a place where they don't really like what they're doing, do you think there's a point of no return? Do you think there's a time where there's always something, you think?
You don't know what's around the corner.
Right.
Just try it. Right. I didn't know I'm going to be an interior decorator. But I've been reworking plans for apartments or for homes.
Right.
I can't do doesn't exist.
And so, Gerda, do you live your life thinking about what I want to do in the future, or do you live your life going day by day more? You know what I mean? Do you constantly think about this is what I want to get done and this is what I'm going to do?
Well, this is what the doctor told me today. He says your problem is that you kind of stopped. Now you took care of your mother all your life and your sister, and both of them are gone. And so you think that you have come to an end. There is nothing beyond it because you have no one anymore to take care of. So you have to reroute your compass, go to something else. And so sometimes you need just one sentence from someone, and he probably doesn't even know what he did for me saying this.
Right. Because
I finished my book, right? I cannot write another one because that one is kind of 50 years of my troublemaking in the community. But, and I said, what do I do now? So I already knitted for your grandma for her project 20 heads for the soldiers.
Right.
So I have to find something that I can do that give for somebody. I need something to do that I can help somebody or make somebody feel good. Because that's my calling. That's who I am.
And I want to say too, I think that idea of wanting to help someone for your own life, it's not just your calling. I would say all people, part of their calling at least has to do with helping someone else, going beyond themselves. I think that's so important.
Yeah. Like Hillel said, if I'm not, who am I?
Right.
And, but that's what I always did for people that were in camp. I did the same. I put my own life, on the line to help somebody because they couldn't help themselves. And Passover, I got an email, a photo of 13 grandchildren with the grandparents. These are great grandchildren of my friend whom I saved in camp. When I saw that 13 great grandchildren, I sat down and I wrote a letter to her son. You saved one human being. You saved the world. 13 great grandchildren. I saved their great grandmother.
Wow.
Because Mengele said, when I come next time, I don't want to see it. Throw it out. She had typhoid fever. Like we pushed her under the bed and covered her with straw.
Wow, and she was okay? Like she ended up being okay?
Oh, because I maneuvered to get cigarettes from the prisoners of war. I put my life online, gave the cigarettes to the camp doctors, so she took care of it. And yeah, she lived in Toronto and now has so many great grandchildren. And they all think I am related to them.
That's incredible. And you know what it reminds me of, actually, is I don't know if you're familiar with the book, Gerda. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Oh, Frankl, yeah. But I don't think I read it, but I know about it, and I know about him.
It's an amazing book, and you know what? He talks about something very similar to you, where he feels like the reason he was able to, in his opinion, not only survive but thrive in the Holocaust was because he lived for something beyond himself. And it seems like you had that same approach. So I'm wondering, when you look at the people you spent your time during the Holocaust with, did you see a common denominator in the people who managed to survive and the people who didn't?
Well, first of all, if you lost hope, you were gone.
Right.
Hope and faith was the only thing that kept us going. And so interesting that I now hear from other survivors from other camps, and they all did the same. Like we made a Seder every year. I was 3 years in camp.
Wow.
When the guard went to shut off the lights in the barracks, we would climb down from the bunk beds and we would collect some bones from birds that in the campsite. You know, they died, the birds died.
Right.
Bones. We stole an egg in the kitchen. We took grass from from outside, and we made a Seder. And whoever remembered any part of the Haggadah would kind of, whatever you call it, recite it.
Right.
I knew it in German. With outstretched arm took us out of Egypt, out of slavery. That part I knew in German, and so I was kind of reciting it in German. On Yom Kippur, nobody lined up for food. What did it mean? You don't have to pick up guns or for a revolution. We showed the Germans, you took everything away from us. You can never take away our faith.
Wow.
And that was what carried us.
I'm curious, Gerda, when you talk about faith, are you talking about a faith in God, or is it a faith in hope? Or is that the same thing?
No. Hope is one thing, faith in God is another.
Can you describe the difference?
We never lost faith in, and you'll hear it from other survivors. And I spoke to people from many other camps. What is so interesting that I always hear they say they will fast on Yom Kippur to show the Nazis who they are, out of the defiance.
Right.
And that's what kept us going, and hope. We was beyond even think, we all will be free and we'll do this and we'll do this. There wasn't even, you didn't know if you'll see another sunset. But if anyone lost hope, you could tell. They just lost everything. Like my friend that committed suicide, right?
The one who jumped in a river, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had no one to live for. Parents were gone, and she lost totally. What am I going to do when I get? There's no one that's going to wait outside the camp for me.
Right.
So I might as well end it now. It's easier to die than to live.
Wow. And do you think, Gerda, like nowadays, 2015, when let's say you're walking down the street, can you look at people the same way you looked at them during the Holocaust and see this person has no hope? Are you able to identify that?
Well, first of all, I never walk by a person that is in need. I will go down to some mics for some test and see them, the homeless there, and I said, can I bring you coffee, or would you like a hot soup? And you know, what can I do for you? I cannot walk by a person. Nobody is there by choice.
Right.
Okay? And I could not live with myself if I don't, and I don't care. Even if they collect it and go and buy a booze, I don't care. That's no longer my business.
Interesting.
But I try to help, and what that person does with it is no longer my business.
Right.
I'm not in judgment. So as long as I know what needs to be done, and that's how I live. Look, there is a person, maybe she's still alive, I don't know, because we're all getting old, and survivors are, less and less of us.
Right.
The girl was working from our camp at a machine and trying to get her quota. Somehow her fingers got caught in the machine. They tore away her fingers. So they were going to send her away. And we were a satellite of Gross-Rosen, was the same camp as Auschwitz, was also that camp, which we didn't know at the time.
Right,
I
right.
found about it later. So they were going to send her out because she was useless. She had no fingers anymore, she couldn't work.
Yes.
I walked in. Now, imagine where I am. Slave worker in the factory, but I worked in a machine shop because they realized that I'm so good with stuff. So I was making parts for machines. On LA I worked. Next to me was the office of the CEO of the factory. It was a huge factory. I walked in the office of the manager of the company and said, Herr Hackel, and I speak fluent German, right?
Right.
There is a girl that lost her fingers in a machine. She came with 10 fingers here. They want to send her away and said, it's for sure she's not, it's a death sentence. He says, but we don't have a job for her. I said, yes, you do. You are taking the supplies from one department to another in barrels, and they're rolling the barrels from one place to another. You don't need fingers for that. You have a job for her. Well, I hope she's still alive, but she lived in New York. But she doesn't know why she's alive.
Right. And I guess to you it doesn't matter. It's just that she's alive, right?
Never told her. She doesn't know that. She just was so happy that they gave her another job.
Right.
The war was over. She went her way. I went my way. I never told her. Now, so many years later, I'm telling this when I'm kind of being asked. Because then I found out that she lives in New York, and yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like I took chances, right? You could throw me out, say, what are you doing here? But if I don't ask, I won't know, right?
Of course, you got to be willing to at least try. And I'm wondering then, did you find after the war had ended and you had moved countries, have you had people that you lost contact with and you almost, I'm not going to say forgot about, but you hadn't spoke with them in however long? Did you ever have the experience of someone who you did help in the past come and try to contact you and to thank you?
No. I wasn't waiting for a thank you. I did what had to be done.
You weren't waiting for the thank you. I think that's so important for people to understand too. You can't go through life expecting everyone to be grateful for you.
No. That's what needed to be done, and I was there and able to do it.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful and powerful lesson for people to learn. Just like you said, Gerda, it's just what needed to be done. You weren't expecting anything in return, I imagine, right?
Like there was a French guy that wrote something. You only walked away once, and if you do something good, you never walked away again. Right. So here is an opportunity from doing something good, and I have either the brain or the power or the will to do it, so I just go and do it.
That's incredible. That's so inspiring for many people, myself included.
That's what I do. Somebody is in need, thanks God I can do it. I think that's why God put me here and made it possible for me to do and gave me the brain that I can think that way. And I'm not a hero. I just do what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's very incredible, and I think that should tell people if Gerda doesn't consider herself a hero, chances are you're probably not either. And I think a lot of people in my generation, especially, there's a sense of entitlement, there's a sense of wanting to be commemorated and wanting to be remembered and wanting to be thanked. And I think it's very important to be humble, just like Gerda is saying, and just doing things, not expecting anything in return, just doing them because you know it's the right thing to do.
You see, my thank you was my grandson had a great idea when he finished the Ivy School in London to go volunteer in the Israeli army for a year.
Right.
What are you doing in the army? I'm a paratrooper. Are you crazy? My grandma was a pilot. Everybody called her crazy. The war breaks out. Where is it set? In Gaza. Last summer. Should I tell you that I sit every night on the internet and reading Jerusalem Post?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
I phoned him, but they weren't allowed telephones, because you can spot where the army is, right?
Of course,
but
yeah.
Whenever he had a phone, they knew that I called, so he called me. He came back, he was speaking at the UJA opening of their campaign, and he started, I followed my grandma's star.
Wow.
I volunteered for the Israeli army because that's my responsibility. That's what my grandma's taught me.
There you go. I'm sure that was very touching, right?
Yeah, 2,000 people in the O'Keefe Center, or whatever they call it now.
Right.
And and he started his thing with, I come by it honestly, so to say.
Right.
But you see, this is my thank you.
There you go. And you weren't ever looking for it. It just came. It was a side effect.
This was that's what I never expected.
It's again that book, Viktor Frankl. He talks about it in a very similar way. He has a quote, and I'm probably not doing it justice here, but he says something like, if you aim for success, or if you're aiming for that gratitude, that sense of a privilege of accomplishment, you're more likely to miss it. Would you agree with that? If you aim for success, if success is your main pursuit.
Nobody cares to say thank you. But when you don't expect, then you are just, thanks God I can do it. I'm grateful that I'm able to do it. If I give money to school, to Jewish school, I am grateful that I am able to help another child get Jewish education. And I never want them to know who gives it. You'll never see my name anywhere.
Actually, I did want to ask you, I saw you have a charity set up in your name, or is that done now?
That's that's the way I'm able to kind of distribute my money that I make.
I see. So it's more for bureaucracy's sake.
That is, well, because it's easy. I have a number of companies. 3 of them are charitable foundations, charitable trust, and all kind of stuff. But then I funneled the money I played the stock market. I had nothing when my husband left me. But I played the stock market and I got lucky. Didn't know what I'm doing, but that's good when you don't know what you're doing.
That's very interesting, actually.
It's best when you don't know what you're doing. So then I funneled the money into my charitable foundation, and then I can write the checks anywhere I want. But you'll never see my name anywhere on a door or a chair or a table or whoever.
Right.
This is not my culture. In Germany, the right hand didn't know what the left hand is doing.
Huh.
That's very American that on every chair is somebody's name. And I give you so much if you put my name on it. That's right. Look, I created the Holocaust Center. It wasn't my name on it.
Yeah. It didn't matter to you.
I didn't. I did it because it needed to be done.
Right.
But that's it. Anyway, I think I kept you long enough.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, Gerda. Again, I want to let you know just
I love you, and we know each other for many years because I was chair of the Musica Butikva.
Right.
And I gave it the name.
Oh, you're the one who named it?
I named it. I was with Shmuel Glick.
Oh, okay.
And it was a coincidence that I was looking for somebody to help me to do the Holocaust Survivors of Canada. I was in charge of the cultural evening, and somebody steered me. Actually, a distant cousin, Lou Applebaum, he was a composer, and he sent me to Shmuel Glick. And then Shmuel Glick told me about the group of the programs. I became a member of that group. I became chair, and I named it Musica Butikva. So I go back. This is like 1980, 84, something like this.
20 years ago or so, yeah.
Yeah, 30 years ago.
30, yeah.
Anyway, time runs fast. Enjoy every day.
Yes, it's so important. And again, Gerda, I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's so important to tell you how thankful I am and how honored I am to be given the chance to interview you. I feel like I've learned a ton just talking to you for this last hour, and I know my listeners will too. So thank you so much again for that.
All the best. Whatever you choose to do in your life, just choose something you like to do.
Thank you too, Gerda. And again, I gotta reinforce that that personal compass of yours. Take your own advice. Find your star. It's not as hard as you think. And just know that myself included, there's so many people who are every day being personally inspired by your story.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So again, thank you so much, Gerda. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you have a good one, Gerda. Bye.
That's it for today's episode. If you guys like what you heard, follow us on Twitter at _theKspot.net, search for The Knowledge Spot on Facebook or SoundCloud, or check us out at www.theKspot.net. Lastly, if you guys have any questions for me, I plan on doing my own personal Q&A sessions through YouTube, so email me at contact@theKspot.net.